In this video, rather than giving you a tour of just one section of a park, you'll be getting a full breakdown for those who have never been to a particular place and want to know more about that place. Today's stop is SeaWorld Orlando, home to some of the most famous shows on Earth, one of the world's greatest rescue and rehabilitation teams, world-class marine attractions, and on a personal note, it's the birthplace of my passion for wildlife. I'm just kidding. I got my inspiration from SeaWorld, Ohio, just to clarify. I'll be taking you through each major exhibit, showing off their strengths, giving my harsh criticisms, and rating them sort of objectively, keep that word in mind, based on these 5 categories. As I like to say in these kinds of videos, I know that not every project was created equally, but I do think these ratings can help you prioritize your day. I understand that SeaWorld is also more of an amusement park, but this will not pay much attention to the rides, Sesame Street Land, or the food and drink packages. Animals will be the primary focus. SeaWorld Orlando opened in 1973 as the company's 3rd major park. It's divided into 8 major zones with 15 animal attractions. As of summer 2024, admission can be $60 depending on the day. But because I believe SeaWorld requires 2 days to fully appreciate everything, you can get a fun card for $139.99, which can get you in every day for the rest of the year. So it's like a membership without all the special perks. Now it's the parking that'll get ya. General parking is $32 to $37 depending on the day, so honestly, you're just best either staying on property or taking an Uber or something else. Even before the security line and the entrance, one of my favorite things to do is stare at this lighthouse scenery. And I like to pretend that the animals are real, even though I can just literally go inside and see real ones. I'm too lazy to do it, but it'd be really nice if one of you could start a petition to get those Orca statues back in there. That'd be great. Oh, and if you could also negotiate to have them change this back to this, that'd also be nice, because I thought this was one of the coolest things in the world to take a photo next to. When I'm actually in the park, I always like to start off my SeaWorld day by going through the first gift shop and saying hello to our friends at the Dolphin Nursery, where your little ones can meet their little ones. It's essentially a temporary place for expecting mothers and calves to learn what it takes to be a dolphin before moving elsewhere to larger habitats in the park. So one of the reasons why it's a little on the smaller side is to make it easier for the caretakers to keep a closer eye on the dolphin's vitals. And because it was designed with that specific of a purpose, I won't be giving it a rating. But I recommend either making this the very first or last stop of your visit. If you continue to the left, like I do, just follow the passing screams on the Manta roller coaster, or the squawks from the flamingos, whichever you prefer. Either way, if you're just here to see some animals, go to the left of the Manta coaster queue and into the Manta Aquarium, a medium-sized seaside village covered in a lot of mosaics, and also home to 3,000 individual animals. Sounds like a lot, but it'll definitely be a quick stop. There's a coral reef, leafy sea dragons, clownfish, and several kinds of sharks. And not manta rays, but lesser devil rays, which look like mantas but in miniature form. And if roller coasters and animals are your thing, the queue has a couple of exhibits as well. The aquarium itself definitely has style, especially with the overhead panel, but I wish it had a bit more substance. At least it has one sign about threats against coral reefs, but I'll still give this a 38 out of 50. The map doesn't say it anymore, of course, but these 4 upcoming exhibits make up Key West. It opened in 1996 and hasn't really physically changed since, but is still one of SeaWorld's strongest exhibits. Where there used to be rescued sea turtles are now a bunch of rescued pelicans. And I don't know what it is, but I love the Stingray Lagoon. It's pretty much the same as every other Stingray touch tank. It might have to do with the sandy bottom, so it's tougher to see the whopping 120 rays. There's a separate section for pups. You can feed the rays, and oh yeah, this is where they filmed one of the juvenile great white shark scenes for Jaws 3D. Maybe that's why I like it. You know what else I like? The bottlenose dolphin habitat. It's probably the best fully man-made outdoor dolphin exhibit and goes beyond looking like your typical empty tank, which SeaWorld is still guilty of. But the one in Key West is beautiful. It's a good size, there's a wave pool, the color looks like the ocean, and even though this isn't a competition video, it is miles better than San Diego's Dolphin Cove. I miss the days when you could literally go up to the edge of the tank and interact with them whenever you pleased, but honestly it's probably better this way, even if that means having to pay for an interaction, which is between $39 to $69, again, depending on the day. Since it's out in the open though, at least you can see the encounter, and it's impossible not to get some sort of memorable moment from down here. The Dolphin Cove also goes fin to fin with the Dolphin Adventure Show. It's one of like the last two surviving remnants of classic SeaWorld. Catchy tunes, consistent and creative ways dolphins show their talents, fan interaction, educational verbal presentations, and best of all, the trainers swim with the dolphins. SeaWorld's changed a lot in the past few years, unfortunately, but at least they still have this. So overall, I'm going to give Key West a generous 46 out of 50. At this point, you mostly have a taste for SeaWorld's entertainment side, but this one spot shows off its caring side. This area has been given a few different names over the last decade. I still call it the Turtle Trek and Manatee Rescue, but it's been changed to simply SeaWorld Rescue Center. I covered this rescue center on the channel. If you decide to go back and watch it, the exhibit's path is now in reverse. It's nice to watch them from above because it's almost kind of like seeing them in the wild. But below, it's much easier to see why they're here in the first place. Some of the turtles are literally missing limbs, and for the most part, the manatee side is a place for orphans to grow before being released into the wild with the helping motherly hands of manatees that have been here since the 80s. A few years ago, they let guests sort of get a look of the behind the scenes to see the manatees that are in much worse shape. But it's been, of course, closed off on my past two visits. They also recently converted the old dome video experience thing into a coral restoration lab. A wonderful renovation that just adds to this area's message of conservation, and that is why I'm giving this rescue center a near perfect 49 out of 50. Also, I won't be giving this next thing a rating because it's sort of just a side attraction that goes with the theme of Journey to Atlantis, but the jewel of the Sea Aquarium shows that you don't need some crazy massive budget or crazy amount of space to create something that'll wow you. In such a small amount of space, they were able to fit in not only a few amazing creatures, but I'll never pass up the opportunity to walk above fish, while also fish are swimming right above me. The next realm takes us to the bottom of the world. Antarctica is more than an exhibit, it's kind of like its own little city, formerly known as the Penguin Encounter. It used to look like San Diego's and San Antonio's habitats. San Diego's was revolutionary for its time, but Orlando's Antarctica changed the game once again, and was arguably the best of its kind in the country before Detroit came along and stole that crown a few years later, in my opinion. That doesn't take away how mind-blowing this one is. The concept was, and I guess still is, worked around a baby Gentoo penguin named Puck. Up until the pandemic, you would spin on these circly thingies through caves of ice, following Puck and his journey until he led us to meet the rest of the colony. Yeah, that's being replaced with a roller coaster as we speak. The habitat itself is one of the world's few open-fronted cold weather penguin displays, which means from the second you walk into that building, you're feeling the same temperature that the penguins are feeling, which is a nice, brisk 32 degrees Fahrenheit. It doesn't really get more immersive than this. The sights, the smells, the cold, the incredibly loud sounds, and to match the lighting of the South Pole, sometimes the exhibit is nearly pitch black for part of the day. I am not afraid to say that this was peak SeaWorld, up until they built what looks like an even better penguin exhibit in the Middle East. So, Antarctica, you've earned yourself a perfect 50 out of 50. The music at Dolphin and Shamu stadiums, screams coming from people on roller coasters. Now those are loud. Nothing even comes close to beating the decibels from the PPP, the Pacific Point Preserve. Home to, yes hello, bunch of boisterous seals and sea lions. Seriously, it's really hard to get a word over here. But it's all part of the fun. Since you can feed them, a lot of them are lined up at the very edge, and some of them can get near your eye level, ignoring all the other ratings categories and just focusing on the exhibit itself. Like Antarctica, This could be the best of its kind in America, and probably was for decades until Omaha made it one of the greatest things of all time. SeaWorld's is actually a little larger, but lacks the surrounding realism and true underwater viewing, if that's something that's important to you. But I have to play it fair and give a proper rating, so when you do factor in all the other categories, the final count for Pacific Point Preserve gets a 45 out of 50 score. But I'm not done yet, my friends. I still haven't even gotten to the best part of this realm. The mimes are pure comedic gold. It is truly amazing to see this style of art in person. By not even saying a word and making thousands of people laugh by trolling incoming spectators who came here to see a show that's not about mimes at all. If you came to this amphitheater just to see them and left as soon as the actual show began, I wouldn't blame you. Just kidding, I would. The sea lion and otter spotlight is actually phenomenal. I was so used to having the charm of Clyde and Seymour take Pirate Island engraved in my head, so I was a little skeptical to see literally anything else that involved sea lions. I've seen this like 6 or 7 times, and I laugh at the same jokes and antics every single time. It has the appeal that a certain killer whale show used to have. Once again, the trainers can work with the animals. They get the crowd involved. The storyline's humor and the storyline itself perfectly ties in with its educational moments. When I said the other day that Disney might have the best animal presentation ever, it's either that or this. I mean, they have an otter that waves to the crowd, and if you're lucky, you might even see Slowpoke the walrus, which you can pay extra to get some one-on-one interactions with her. One of my favorite kinds of exhibits are aquariums in traditional zoos. So with Manta and the shark encounter, it's kind of cool seeing separate traditional aquariums and also what you would probably call a giant aquarium. If that doesn't make sense, just go with it. There are loads of attractions dedicated to sharks, but this one really gets it right. The sharks are displayed in a variety of ways. There's your typical tanks, yes, but also a very long tunnel home to sand tigers, white tips, zebras, sawfish, and hammerheads. There's a station outside that, again, lets you feed them, and a restaurant that gives you another view of the main attraction. One of my biggest pet peeves with SeaWorld in general is the lack of signage for guests to learn things on their own without having to go see a presentation. But not at the shark encounter. It gets creative and does a really good job making sure you leave this building believing that sharks are not monsters, but humans are basically the reason why sharks have any problems at all. So I will give this a 47 out of 50. And now, it's time for the moment you've all been waiting for. Infinity Falls. Just kidding. I've tried to ignore the rides as much as possible because I come here for animals. And some of us became interested in animals in the first place because we were once introduced to Shamu. Orlando's Shamu Stadium is composed of 6 different tanks, 2 public, 1 medical, and combines to hold 7 million gallons, which should either make it the largest or tied for the largest aquatic animal exhibit in the country. As for the amphitheater, the aesthetics in San Diego are cool, and people were expecting Orlando to do this, and a lot of people were mad that they didn't. But I actually kind of dig the new renovations, which I don't have footage of. As for the rest of the complex, there are a few realistic changes I'd like to make. The Blue World project isn't happening. It makes sense not to expand when you're phasing a species out. But at the very least, the Shamu close-up part can use some changes. The signage near the glass has seen better days. I just found out not too long ago that you used to be able to see the orcas from above with very little restrictions. You can still kind of do that in San Diego, but it's okay. Back in Orlando, not only do you have to sign up for Dine with Shamu to get this view, but if you compare it to this photo, the filtration systems and barren features are really a distraction. The media convinced people, or SeaWorld convinced the media, that they don't do theatrical shows anymore. They definitely still do, and I love it. Objectively, the quality, size, and theming might not compare to San Diego's, but I applaud Orlando and San Antonio for adopting the new educational format while still keeping that classic Shamu vibe with the music and acrobatics, because my goodness, the one in California nearly put me to sleep. Obviously, this is entertaining. You might learn something here if you don't come like every other week, but because of the size and quality, I will still have to give Shamu Stadium, no, not Orca Stadium or Orca Encounter, a 43 out of 50. Seems like a very fitting finale, but we have one more stop to go. If you told me that the Wild Arctic is your all-time favorite exhibit, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. We already covered the San Diego version on the channel, but if you didn't see it, the Wild Arctic is kind of like Antarctica, except obviously it takes you to the top of the world in an equally highly thematic environment, filled with towering ice, a backstory about a ship, and some of the ocean's most beloved animals. It used to have a motion simulator, but like San Diego, they closed that ride portion down as well. There's rumors that it might get replaced with like a Soarin' type ride, like an Epcot, but I don't know. Anyways, the ride Q was the entrance. So even a few years later, I still see a lot of people wonder, how the heck do you get in here? At least San Diego's bypass is obvious. Orlando's entrance is essentially its exit in the gift shop. Wild Arctic used to be my all-time favorite marine mammal attraction. As a kid, it was really fun playing into the illusion that you were transported to a completely different world to study animals in the Arctic. It has the ship, the actual ice wall, researcher stuff, and a bunch of other cool things to create an immersive experience. San Diego's Wild Arctic has those too, but because the Florida one is an all-indoor exhibit, that allowed the designers to also make it really, really cold. Not as cold as Antarctica, but still cold enough to make you completely forget about the heat outside. Overall, Wild Arctic is still educational. It's nice to know that everything still works nearly 30 years later, and still holds up as a very stimulating encounter that can bring your imagination to life. So, it will get a 47 out of 50. Now comes my favorite part of these rating videos, where I basically give my overall impression and reveal the verdict of whether or not I think you should make a visit here as soon as possible. Despite some of my critiques, which I think are reasonable, if you couldn't tell by some of my other tones, yeah, I recommend spending whatever you can to get here. Especially if you're someone who cares about conservation and you want to pass that passion down to your children like I want to someday. I don't care what the naysayers say or think about this place. For nearly 30 years, I've never really looked at SeaWorld as anything other than just another zoo, just with more theatrics. But it's because of the theatrics, silliness, and keeper-to-creature connections that makes this a perfect place to get someone interested in wildlife. I still owe it to the place for making me realize what I wanted to do in life ever since I was 3 years old, which was work with animals in some way. And without SeaWorld, I can guarantee you that I would not have this channel. The overall quantity and quality of its zones are far better and more engaging than the other two parks. And a lot of zoos and aquariums for that matter. By the way, I am planning to do a comparison video between the main parks, or at least Orlando versus San Diego. But it's not even close to a competition. Just in case you needed help deciding on which one to visit, SeaWorld Orlando comes out on top in nearly every way. And that will conclude another full breakdown review. So please stay tuned for the next SeaWorld episode. Stay wild, and thank you all for watching Zoo Tours.